You're going to love it.
Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm here in studio today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
All right, so let's, we got quite a variety of topics. Going to talk about things going on in the Chinese EV sector, things going on in the UK EV sector, General Motors and Tesla stock, renewable energy shift in the United States. We'll talk about the dumpling protest, and we're going to talk about restricting cars in cities. We're going to start out with the restricting cars in cities. So this one's kind of a wild deal because, like in London, they got this deal now that you have to pay some special tax to bring your vehicle into the center of London.
And 15 pounds, I think it is, something like that, every day.
Yeah, to bring your vehicle into the center of London. And they're trying to do these things to both reduce traffic congestion and reduce pollution in the inner city. Now, my understanding is in London, if it's an EV, it doesn't pay it, right? EVs don't pay it
at this point, but who knows how that'll evolve,
Right.
Because they're wanting to get away from all these cars that are, I mean, I'm sure you've probably been to London. I've been to London. You could go faster across London with a horse carriage than you can in a car today. It's crazy.
So all the cars are just sitting there idling and just pumping out fumes. No, I get it. I get it. So schemes are currently being done in Berlin, London, Milan, Stockholm, and Madrid as well. Other cities in the UK have been looking at it. Some cities are restricting the types of vehicles. Others allow staggered access based on criteria such as license plate number, or require drivers to pay congestion charges to enter some parts of the city. Now, Madrid's central LEZ, or low emission zone, aims to look past political controversies to understand the private costs and social benefits of these measures. So a university in Spain did a study on this. They had banned most vehicles from certain areas of Madrid as of the end of November 2018. So we've now had this for
some time,
almost 6 years. Almost 6 years. So at one point, the Supreme Court of Justice of Madrid annulled the low emission zone, arguing that the city hadn't conducted thorough economic impact reports before implementing the ban. The ruling is being appealed. So now it's back down again. They've obviously met with resistance in other places. There's been protests in London over what's being done there. Now, it's obviously controversial topic, but it's interesting to see where some of this has had. So,
and by the way, they're wanting to introduce it into New York City, and they haven't. As you'd expect, they've met with opposition, and it hasn't been enacted yet. So,
I really can't imagine living in New York City and owning a car.
No.
I mean, it just doesn't seem like it makes sense to even own a car. I remember seeing where EV adoption was really low in New York City, but the just ownership of cars in general isn't that high there.
First of all, where the heck do you park the thing? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was back years ago. I was at a event that was being hosted by one of the car companies, and they were having us test their new EV model. And we were doing this over in Brooklyn, over next to one of the parks. And so we're driving around Brooklyn there, and I'm thinking, there's no place to park a car here. Not only were all the streets lined with cars parked, but they were double parked along the streets. How does this work? What do you guys do? There's this little point in owning a car there. You've got good public transit. You got taxis and Ubers, and you got the subway, and you got bike share. We'll talk about that in a minute. So why own a car?
Yeah,
particularly
well,
since the cost of a parking space is nearly the cost of an apartment.
yeah, electric buses make so much sense in big cities. I mean, it just absolutely make great sense. And there's some things, people will talk about, whether they like EV cars or not, or they hate them or whatever, but it's really hard to argue against electric buses, and just,
You've you've seen, I'm sure, the illustrations where they take, I don't know, we'll pick a number, 100 people, and they put each as an average in a car on a street, right? They take a one-way street and they say, okay, now we're going to have those 100 people and put them in a bus, right? And then they
Mhm,
compare the length of the bus to the length of the cars that are there, and then they say, and let's now put them on bikes, right? And
mhm.
it's a fraction of the length of both of those put together. So yeah, it's a fascinating illustration of how much sense, in these high congestion areas, you don't need a car. Okay, you do if you live in suburbia. If you live someplace out on Long Island or Jersey or wherever, but if you live in the city, you don't need a car.
We've done a bunch of videos about school buses in the past and electric school buses. And
Yep.
there was always discussion about how it's keeping people away from the diesel smell. And there's always somebody who will comment, "Oh, I've never heard of anybody complaining about the smell of diesel on a bus." And it's just like, well, the kids don't know any better. The kids just know they have to go on the bus. What's the sense in
Yeah.
complaining
Yeah.
about the diesel smell? They don't know any better. And the truth is, all the kids want to ride at the back of the bus, and that's where the smell's the worst.
Yeah.
And that's where the most diesel exhaust is coming in. But they try to act like that's not a big deal.
No.
And it's like,
Yeah.
well, it is. It is a health issue for
I
people who are.
contend that we should have long ago passed a law that the exhaust from your car
Mhm,
comes out the front and not the back.
mhm.
Right? I mean, okay, all right, fine. I mean, the air's got to go somewhere, but you don't want to smell it.
Right.
But pump it into the faces of the person behind you.
Yeah. Well, that is kind of the way we do it, isn't it? Um, that is a kind of a funny take on the whole thing. So, anyways, it's part of what they came up with here, though, was in Madrid, they
Yep.
realized that they had reduced pollution by a whopping 19%. Now,
Yep.
what's happened was there was a feeling that maybe they would simply displace the pollution, and that didn't happen. So they thought maybe it would increase the pollution in the areas around the zone, and that actually did not occur. So that was kind of a fascinating find.
But
Um,
what it did do, however, in studying the economic side of this, is it did have a measurable impact on the economics of the retail businesses in that area in terms of outsiders coming in and buying goods and services from businesses within the zone. What they
right.
did is they got a hold of credit card receipts or whatever, and they studied all this to look at what was the impact of businesses in that area as opposed to people that live in the area compared to people that didn't live in the area and probably got there by car. And they looked, and
Mhm.
there was a decline in the revenue from people that were outside the zone coming into the zone to buy. So it did have an economic impact. Although you're reducing the air pollution, that too has to have an economic impact, right?
Mhm. Hmm. So this is interesting. So it was a 21% decrease
Mm-hmm.
in spending in person, but there was a 12% increase in online spending buying from those same shops,
Yeah.
suggesting some buyers were
Not a
willing to make the
wash, but
purchases online instead of having to
right.
drive into the city. There was a 16% reduction in traffic congestion.
Mm-hmm. And now,
Um,
these are unmeasurables, right? Is that a word? Unmeasurable. These are unmeasurables. How do you put a value to breathing cleaner air? How do you put a value to having freer time where you're not stuck in traffic, right?
Mhm.
How how do you put a freer time of shopping online as opposed to having to jump in a car, go down there, find a place to park, purchase something, get back in the car, drive out of the, all that has economic cost to it.
I'd be pretty upset though if I were a restaurant owner in that zone and I saw a 20% reduction
Yeah. Oh,
in
sure.
my sales because
Yeah.
of the fact that people didn't want to drive there because they had to pay $15 each day to drive into the zone.
But
That's
then,
a
but then they also probably had to pay that much or more to park the car, right?
true, true. No, I get it. I get it. There's a lot of ups and downs to this, but I can see where you could take these statistics and manipulate them a lot of different
Oh,
ways to make it
sure.
sound like a disaster
Right.
or a success.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of the things. The way you use statistics, can
Statistics,
really impact.
what is statistics don't lie, but liars use statistics or something
Yeah.
to that effect.
Well, a 19% reduction in pollution, but doesn't mean much to that business owner whose business went down, 21%.
Yeah, but maybe what he could, because the streets are cleaner and there's less traffic, he can move some of his business outdoors, right?
Yeah, there's a thought,
Yeah. I
um,
mean, I guess what we're saying is there is no silver bullet, right? I mean, there's
no,
always going to be pros and cons to how we do these things. And we have to try to weigh what's the greater good for society.
yeah. I've always said that for every law like the government passes, there's always some unintended
Oh,
consequence
sure. Yeah.
of that. And some of it they might know that something's going on, or something that might happen, but a lot of times just an unintended consequence of things that go on. Some of them end up being terrible for society, and but you may not realize till decades later.
Yeah.
But obviously, there should be other solutions. If they're bringing electric trains, electric buses, zero emission things to increase the transportation into those centers, I think that is beneficial.
Yeah, speaking of which, I just posted a story this morning that the Grand Canyon Railway, which has been traditionally a diesel locomotive pulling it, now it's got
Mhm.
funding to shift over to electric locomotives. So that 60 miles of track that they have is going to be electrified with overhead catenaries. So they're gra- gradually moving away from
So they're going
from
to use the power
cars.
line method rather than a big battery on the trains.
Yeah.
Okay. But most of those trains are diesel electric to start with, so they probably already have a big battery, right?
I suppose, yeah. Well, it looks like from the photograph that I looked of the locomotive, yeah, it's just a traditional diesel electric. So,
Yeah, so pretty much all trains have been hybrid for decades, right?
oh yeah, since probably the 50s.
Yeah, and it's funny because people don't really think about that too
And
much,
and submarines have been
right?
diesel electric even longer.
For a very long time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
World War
it-
One.
right, right. It's hard to imagine when you think about electric vehicles applications that have come up for this. I was telling you before the show about our hate for some of our aviation videos. What
Oh
was
yeah.
funny was some of the criticism of our aviation video. People were citing the fact that the pipistrel, which we'd done a previous video on, is the only, allowed, certified by the FAA electric aircraft, in the United States. And
Well,
was funny
that's
is when we did that one, we really got a lot of hate on that one
well, I
too.
mean that's going to change because there's at least the Buy Aviation in Denver
Mhm.
that's moving rapidly towards, and there are other companies. In fact, I have to, one of the things I volunteered to do, I'm a member of the local Experimental Aircraft Association, chapter here in Omaha, and I'm scheduled to give a talk on electric aviation. I think it's in January. So I'll put together a presentation and get all that, but I'll identify who was it just got. Come on, it's on the web page there. Just got authorization. Honda, yeah, Honda. I think just got authorization to begin test flying their scaled model from the FAA. So we're moving in that direction. It's at a reasonable clip for safety's sake.
Yeah, well, it's like a lot of other things. We know that electric aviation is going to be short hop type stuff. That there's going to be niche uses to it.
Yep.
It's not like it's going to replace commercial airlines or anything anytime soon. It's going to take a long time to come up with any type of zero emission solutions for
there's
commercial
this
aviation.
market that I would love to exploit in the Caribbean, and I won't say more than that. But this would be perfect for that technology.
Yeah. So the short hop technology for commuter airlines, it's just like the Sea Glider. Sea Glider is a good thing for that kind of situation.
Yep.
But as are
what about that? Yeah, that would even work too.
But you think
some
about
respect would work even better.
Well, you also think about the fact that all those islands are kind of ripe for EVs to start with, simply because they don't have, range anxiety can't really be a big thing because it's.
This sounds like a conversation that I had with Mike just last week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, when we've looked at things for Exceeder Fleet and Derrick Automotive, yeah, it's been one of the things is, hey, islands are kind of a captive audience, because when you're making a couple of EVs that only have 100 to 120 mile range, the idea of having them on an island where the speed limits are low, because these are low speed electric vehicles.
It's 7 miles from tip to tip and 5 miles wide.
Right. I mean, they've even looked at putting solar panels on the roof of these trucks, things like that. Honestly, the solar panel probably gives it another 10 miles a day of range.
Yeah.
Being parked outside. It's not anything crazy, but when you've only got a little island, you might not drive more than 10 miles a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just, never really know. But
the exception to that being Cuba at the moment.
And well, Cuba's a pretty big island, but they don't have electricity either.
No, that's what I'm saying. They don't have electricity. The grid is out.
Yeah, how does that fail? Where that one?
Well, we don't want to get
Mike.
into geopolitics.
That should be a talk I have with Mike.
That's the geopolitics of the U.S. embargo. That everybody except the U.S. and Israel has said, stop it. Stop the daggum embargo. And the U.S. and Israel recently just voted, no, we're going to keep it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not in favor of the stupid government they ended up with down there, but boy, I just hate to see those people suffering the way they do.
Yeah, embargoes are kind of wild sometimes, because it's hard to know who they're hurting or benefiting. And you would think that if there was enough tourism going to Cuba or whatever, and interest in tourism, that as the people there meet more outsiders, you'd see, you'd see change. But you look at China, and I realize we're going to talk about China a little bit, but you look at, for the most part, for the last 20 something years, 30 years, they've really done a lot to raise the standard of living from everybody being just a dirt poor farmer in a communist country to a lot of people have been successful. Now, you got people who are way up here and you got people who are way down here, and the gap is massive. The gap is massive. And a lot of it is who's been anointed by the Communist Party to become wealthy. Okay. And I know people who've become wealthy in communist China, and they have fled because they weren't paying off the right people. they'll execute people for corruption there. Yet that's how, it's really a weird situation because you can't do anything without being corrupt.
Welcome to the benefits of oligarchy.
Yes. Yeah. But anyways, I wanted to go from our last chat to talk about the United Kingdom's, they're currently on track with their EV plan. So they'd like to go 100% EV by 2035. And the way the adoption of EVs is going, they're ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
And so while people may complain about the mandates they keep putting in,
BMW and Mercedes.
yeah, and it's mostly due to strong sales from Mercedes and BMW.
Yep.
Current country is currently on track to hit its ambitious goals. Well, the thing is, you can buy BYDs in the UK now. I suspect there's pretty big tariffs on them, and I'm sure they're certainly not as cheap as they are in China. But I'm just saying there's some other options there.
And if you look at the reviews that are being done, because there are a lot of guys over there that are doing reviews, they get very favorable reviews on those cars.
Last month, 1 out of 5 new cars sold in the UK was electric. 5 years ago, the EV market share was only 1.6%.
Yeah. Yep.
Versus 20, I think they're at 22%. Let's see, the UK's shift to electric cars is on track. Its goal for 2035 being at 100% zero emissions for new car sales, with manufacturers having new targets for EVs that ramp up each year. The mandate started in 2024, but BMW and Mercedes are definitely leading the way. Some of the automakers are selling more EVs than they're required to, but they have these numbers. The target was 22% of new cars sold this year. Though for the first 3 years, the manufacturers can offset that number if they shrink emissions in other ways, such as selling hybrid cars. BMW's on track to sell nearly 25%, and Mercedes will likely hit a similar percentage. So these two German companies are giving confidence that we can get to 100% sales in 2035. Other companies like Ford are struggling, but that's mainly due to a lack of preparation. Ford managed to start at the beginning of 24 with a grand total of 1 electric model on sale. So what was it? It was either the Mach-E or the F-150.
No, it's the Mach-E. Yeah, it's a Mach-E.
But you can buy an electric Explorer in the UK. So they don't make an electric Explorer in the US.
The German version of the Explorer.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's
okay.
the German version of the Explorer. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, price parity is getting closer. They're getting to be competitive. Manufacturers reducing prices that compete with each other to secure the sales they need to hit their targets. That's driving prices down, which is driving sales up. On a slightly off topic, I saw somebody pushing that there's a East Coast Chevy dealer that's got a couple $1,000s of incentives on like a new Chevy Equinox, and with the base model with the $7,500 tax credit plus another like $2,500 they were throwing in, you could be out the door before taxes at about $23,000.
And I think it's got like a 300-mile range, something like that.
Yeah, and I'm just like, wow, that's really nuts. I looked to see if I could actually find an article that we could use, and I couldn't really find anything other than just kind of the mention of it, a little bit about that one car company's website. I've found a few other people who are big in pushing the $4,000 tax credit, for used cars, where some dealership chains have really figured it out and are pushing out a lot of cars, and they're not just Teslas, where they're pushing out all kinds of used cars they can get their hands on.
It's interesting. We stay on Britain for a moment. The Jaguar, the I-Pace was, so-so. It was a first attempt and not particularly successful, but they have gone back and re-engineered, and I think they're coming up with 3 now. All electric. In fact, their plan is to be here within the next 5 years. I think their plan is sticking with it to be all electric. And then I saw something that Land Rover, which is of course is Land Rover Jaguar, but the Land Rover side is coming up with an electric, and they've got something like 45,000 pre-orders for an all-electric Land Rover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, one thing with the Jaguar thing, I mean, they are using them on the Waymo platform. So,
yes, yeah. That's where a lot of those I-Pacers that came into the country went for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we're getting a lot of feedback. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. John, I don't know. I know the mandates are going to be gone, and they may do something with the rebates. I think the one thing you're going to see is I think you're probably going to see the leasing loophole for that needs to get closed up. So I suspect they will close that up, because the whole idea, even under the Inflation Reduction Act, was to give the credit for people who are buying cars that are supporting American manufacturing in the battery space. And the leasing loophole allows you to skip that. Okay, so I would expect that to get rolled back first. And then, who knows where we see what happens with the rebates as time goes on.
Yeah,
I just don't think you're going to see them go after targeting that right off the bat.
Yeah, I've seen commentary, and that's all we call it at this point. It's commentary both ways. That it's going to disappear, and that there's no way they're going to touch it. They're going to leave it in place. So I don't know. We'll have to see it. It kind of really depends on how much pressure. Well, for example, here, his chief advisor at the moment is Elon Musk, whose company has greatly benefited from rebates and government, handouts. So, will that go away? Or will Elon object? And I'll tell you what, who's got more clout financially, the Trump organization or Elon Musk? What he made? Another $30 billion with the how the election went, the value of Tesla.
So I plan on covering a little bit about that today. But what I was going to say is it actually benefits Musk more to have the rebates go away. Okay, because the used car rebate doesn't do anything for him, right? The new car rebates, he makes money on selling the cars. He can make money without the rebates. The others are losing money. So, or I shouldn't say they're all losing money. I mean, we know some of them are losing money.
Yeah, sizable.
Yeah. I don't see honestly how Musk has time to do some of the stuff that he'd like to do to help with the government. So I just that's my only skepticism there. I don't see how the guy does everything he does now. I mean, I'm just I'm stunned that he can do that. It's just maybe the guy doesn't sleep.
The big surprise for me, I mean, obviously Elon was very visible, in his support, jumping up and down and so on, and running this stunt regarding giving $1 million for people to sign his petition and so on. The one that really surprised me is Charles Hoskinson. Are you aware of that?
I'm not.
The guy that is who is playing an advisory role. How long and how much, we don't know. But advisory role is Charles Hoskinson, who is the creator, along with, of course, a lot of other very, very smart people, of the Cardano blockchain.
Oh, wow.
And so I saw overnight the value of my Cardano double.
Oh, nice.
It went from 34 cents to 62 cents. Now it's hovering around 58, 57, something like that at the moment. But when word got out that he apparently is looking to become be an advisor to the administration on cryptocurrency policy, that was good for the handful of shares of ADA that I own.
Yeah, well, I wanted to show a couple things today, and one of them is how well GM has been doing. And despite,
Yeah.
how they may be losing some market share overseas, and maybe they're not. I don't know. I always look at China and I look at how the Chinese companies are growing. And here, this is year to date. General Motors is up 58.5% for the year. They started out the year at about 36 bucks. They're currently worth $21 more at 57.16. Excuse me. From time to time, this number here will bounce up above 60%. And it's just crazy to see the growth they've had. They have moved into the number 2 position in EVs in the US.
Yeah.
They definitely have the biggest range of EVs between all the enormous EV trucks they sell. You've got the Silverado and the versions that they've got
The GMC. Yeah.
as a GMC. They've got the Hummer, and they've got a number of
Chevy models.
cars. And, yeah, a number
Yeah,
of
the Chevy
SUVs
line.
now.
They,
And
by
I
the
think they're going
way,
to bring the Bolt back.
yeah, in fact, they just announced that they're closing one of their Cadillac production lines, and they're
Mhm.
shifting that over to bringing out the new Volt. So they're serious here. They're
Oh, there's
serious,
going to make
and it's
a
paying
new
off.
Volt or a Bolt.
No, Volt. Sorry, Bolt.
Okay.
That always confused me why they did that, but anyway, it'd be the new Bolt. So
Yeah.
that's going to be on a former Cadillac CTS or something like that. That production line.
Yeah. Well, now let's look over here. Now, this bit or Tesla's not done as well today, but
No,
here
they're
is
not.
year to date. They're up 32%. Now they started out the year at almost 250 bucks, but before the election, they were down at around 218. At one point, they had really dropped low. They dropped to $142 earlier this year, and currently they're at 328 bucks. Although they were at 350 yesterday. So, they've taken a little dip back down, but they're up 32% for the year, which is about half the gain that GM has had this year. But if you were to take
Interesting.
Tesla from its lowest spot, then it's a whole different story.
Well,
And
I posted a couple of stories this morning about where people are getting rid of their Teslas
Mhm.
because of, now this isn't everybody, and there are a lot of people that's no problem what Elon does, but there are people that are sensitive to that, and they are trading in their Teslas and shifting over to other cars, and GM is coming along with some really appealing alternatives to what Tesla's offering.
man, looking at where Bitcoin is now, Bitcoin was like $89,000 last
Oh,
night.
oh
This
God.
is for 1 year. One
Yeah.
year they're up 136%. They were at
Yeah.
37,000 a year ago. If you went back farther though, I mean they had dipped where down to like $6,200. Well, that was a few years ago. Where did we get? We had a couple times we dipped down to like 14,000, 16,000. Now we're back up
Yeah.
to almost $90,000. If we just look at the last 5 days, though, it's
Oh,
or the past month is even better. 40% growth in the past month. I mean, it's just nuts. How much the U.S. election news benefited Bitcoin. And the one thing that's been kind of interesting is the stock market and Bitcoin can tend to trend together.
right.
So, so it's
And BlackRock, I think, is offering or is currently offering a ETF.
there's a
Uh,
couple of them. IBIT's the big one,
yeah.
and they're
The
it's
reason,
interesting seeing that happen.
yeah, the one of the reasons why Cardano went up is because they had a conference in Dubai last week, where it was announced that what they call the Bitcoin operating system, which is tied to Cardano's blockchain and uses many of the features. There are many similarities between the way Bitcoin is structured and the way the Cardano blockchain is structured. And what they're hoping is that this will allow greater interoperability so that you can write smart contracts and all these things and use the Cardano blockchain to process those in terms of bitcoins. So it's interesting. I don't understand. This is all, a lot of it just goes over my head, but they are this linkage between the two has really been an exciting step forward, and it'll be interesting to see how those two interact and how they play.
Well, I was going to say, if I go back to General Motors, people have got to be really happy with Mary Barra. I mean, she's had an exceptional year this year.
Yes.
And one of the things is GM has done $12.4 billion in stock buybacks since last November. And they said they're going to continue doing that, which, every time they do a stock buyback, it makes the value of your stock worth a little more.
Yep.
So that's definitely driving things up there. Mary, there's a few companies out there you could gobble up while you're making all this extra, doing so well in the stock market.
Or how about all that money that Warren has been stockpiling? What's he going to do with all that? Wow. Warren Buffett.
I'm looking to see if some of that'll spill out onto Farnham or something like that, and it just goes scoops them up as I'm going down the road.
Farnham is one of our streets here in Omaha, just FYI.
Yeah. If I drive past his house, well, where is he? I guess is it Harney or Farnham he's on? He's right there at 55th, just a block off of Dodge. Yeah. But, I just feel that money should be coming out of his wrought iron fence and just like falling out on the street around it.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. Sorry, that's not how it works. I'm waiting though for when we find out how much Bitcoin he's bought.
That would be it.
He's never, he said, I don't understand Apple. I don't understand technology. I'm never going to buy Apple. How much Apple did he buy and how much has he sold now?
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
How much money has he made from Apple?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? But
the Berkshire ETF. When do you think we'll see that? The Berkshire Bitcoin ETF.
Oh yeah, I don't think that'll happen until Warren dies.
Yeah.
Whoever takes over, it'll probably come up. I mean, here's some interesting things in the car space. Since Trump won the election, GM's up 54%, Ferrari 34%, Tesla 29%, Hyundai 28%, BYD 27%, Toyota is down 6%, Ford is down 10%, Honda's down 13%, Toyota's down 28%, Nissan's down 36%. A whole bunch of companies though are way down. Li Auto, Stellantis is down 42%.
Oh, Stellantis is a basket.
Stellantis is taking a beating. Lucid and Rivian's down 55%. Damn.
And that is because they screwed up on that supplier situation, that they didn't order the motors that they were supposed to have ordered, and that's took 10,000 vehicles off of their potential sales. So yeah,
so Nine is talking in the chat about Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining's lots of energy. Some of those coin containers are allowed. Yeah, because they come in those shipping containers of servers. And yes, they are loud. They're tough to cool off. They use a lot of electricity. And it's wild trying to find locations to put that stuff, because it's really hard to find enough juice on the grid to hook that kind of stuff up.
which is why we're looking at Cardano, because Cardano uses a different system, a proof of stake system that doesn't use anywhere near the amount of energy. Now, scalability, they're still working on, right? The time to process orders. But in terms of energy use, their process uses fractions of the amount of energy. So I think those two would be a nice synergy. They can help bring down those processing costs.
All right, let's talk about the Chinese EV sector for a minute. So this is coming from.
I want to talk about dumplings.
Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that after this, okay? So,
wait for this one, folks. This is good.
Yeah. The Chinese EV sector unleashes potential amid fierce competition and protectionism. Now, this comes from Global Times.
Here.
This comes from Global Times of China. Okay, so this
All right.
probably has been, take it with a grain of salt. This has probably been edited a little bit. But China's biggest EV maker, BYD, has posted higher quarterly revenues than U.S. maker Tesla for the first time ever, according to the Financial Times. BYD's revenues reached $28.2 billion for the quarter, surpassing Tesla's $25.2 billion in sales that Tesla had reported last week. The Chinese car maker sold a record of 1.1 million cars in the 3-month period. Now, they make battery electric and plug-in hybrid. Probably, and in that total, it's probably about half of each.
And here's the interesting thing that I heard. They've got I don't know if they work for the Financial Times or there's a young lady that does the stats on these EV exports. And the interesting thing is we're all concerned about all of the Chinese cars being imported into Europe. It turns out that 90% of the Chinese export cars into Europe are European brands.
Oh, okay.
Volvo and Polestar represent 90% of the exports into Europe from China. All the rest that are done are parts suppliers and things like that, but finished cars going into Europe are 90% of those are European branded cars.
So it's not BYD and NIO dominating.
No. Polestar and Volvo,
which are part of what? Geely Group, right?
Part of the Geely Group. Yep.
Yeah. So while they have traditionally been European brands, they've been kind of switching over to Chinese brands to some degree.
Make them in China, ship them. I assume by ship somewhere or another, either through.
I'm just saying that they're traditional European brands.
Yeah.
Well, Volvo is, but it's slowly been transitioning into a Chinese company.
Yeah, and Polestar was just a spinoff of Volvo. So
right. But I thought this was kind of interesting that BYD stepped into that spot on the money as the global, largest EV seller.
Yeah.
So that's something a little different. All right, so we'll talk about the weird story for the day. So I really don't know what to think about this. So tell us about the 4 girls. Let's start with that.
Okay, so what happened is over the weekend. This is all happening, within the week here. I think 4 or 5 girls. I can't remember exact number, but it's 4 or 5 girls. Decided that they were going to take. There are electric bike share systems all over China, literally hundreds of thousands of these bikes, and so they decided that in the middle of the night they were going to rent their bikes. They were going to ride, and I think it was either 40 or 50 kilometers maybe between these 2 Chinese cities. And they chronologed this. They had their little phones and they were, recording it. And they rode this thing to go to this other town to buy dumplings. those little things that I really love. And they recorded that and they posted it online. And of course, as you're probably aware, everything gets scrutinized by the Chinese government. Well, what's the harm in for young ladies riding a bike in the middle of the night and telling their story that they're going to buy dumplings? Talk about unintended consequences.
Oh yeah, this is nuts.
That spread like wildfire across China to the extent that literally groups of 100,000 Chinese youth, mainly college kids or kids who just graduated, late 20s or late teens, early 20s, did the same thing and decided to ride between some of the biggest cities in China to go buy dumplings. And of course, the government's sitting there scratching. Well, they're not protesting for freedom. They're not trying to overthrow the government. What are we going to do? This thing has spread so much that the show I was watching, the China show, has spread so much that they estimate somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million Chinese have copied that and literally clogged for miles the highway system in China between all of these major Chinese cities. And the government's sitting there scratching their head. Well, what do we do with this, right? So I don't know if it's still going on or not, but this has happened within like the last 7 days. It's just a phenomenon. They're not marching on Tiananmen Square, although there was one group who decided to ride their bikes to Tiananmen Square, but they're not sure what all this means. But the analysis, at least the two gentlemen that do this show on China, is that this was a way for the Chinese youth who have a huge unemployment problem. They go through college, they work hard, they pass the test, they look for a bright new future, and there's no future there because there are no jobs for them. So this is what's referred to as the junk. I think it's called the junk period of China history. And they just, well, what are we going to do? Well, let's go get together and ride mass riding. I mean, there's videos of this. You can find the videos online of these people miles long, 15 bikes wide,
Oh, well, the government started a crackdown.
Yeah.
So I just found articles about the crackdown.
Okay.
So police didn't take any action at the time, but they have announced a ban on cycles from downtown Jingzhou, reserving main roads for motorized traffic only. The cycle hire companies, Qingzhou and
a bunch of them.
Meituan or something like that, responded by banning the riding of their bikes between city jurisdictions, saying anyone who defied the ban would have the hired bike locked remotely.
Right.
But apparently it's not just kids or young people, because there's people saying retired from the Air Force, night ride to Kaifeng, let's go. Other people, so they're getting military veterans doing it too. Yep. And they're concerned. They're not really sure exactly what this could lead to, but this is really, let me see, all students were told to return to campus and then not allowed out again for a certain period of time. The university sent out a lot of internal notices to counselors and other staff, which you can see online. Let me see, students were required to get a special pass to leave campus.
All for the love of dumplings. Now, I have a dumpling story, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Last time I was in Beijing was in 2002. And the gentleman that was my host has property up in the mountains. I guess it's, be northeast of Beijing. And it's up an area where there is the Great Wall. And he took me up there to actually hike to and onto a remote portion of the Great Wall that very few people are aware of. In fact, somewhere here in my desk, I have a chunk of it had broken off, and it was, I brought it back with me, of the mortar from the Great Wall that is several hundred years old.
Mhm.
And so he took me up there. And after we got done hiking, he brought me down because what he was trying to do was do a sort of a retreat, set up a retreat for people who were in China, who were in Beijing, and they wanted to get out of the city. And so he had took this old, I think it was an old communist Chinese commune, and was slowly converting it over and improving it. So he had a guy that was the caretaker, and the caretaker invited us in and was there hand making these dumplings for us, and then deep frying up, for us. That was my first exposure to dumplings. So I've had a love for dumplings since.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, Bill, that's all we've got for today, folks. I want to
That's
thank
enough.
y'all for chiming in and putting
Thank
up
you.
with us. And got a few people chatting today. Sometimes people
Yeah.
chat, and sometimes they don't. It's
Yeah.
always fun to get a little bit of audience participation.
Yeah,
Anyways, I'll be back with Mike Herzog tomorrow and Bill on Thursday. Otherwise, folks, thanks again
Bye-bye.
for